Hello there, and welcome back to my channel. So in my past videos, I've talked extensively about the toxic behavior of the fandom menace. And in one of my recent videos titled The Responsibility of the Fandom, I also go into detail as to what I expect from people of my own side of the fandom, people who either like the new movies, like the way Disney's handling Star Wars, or people who might not enjoy those movies, might not enjoy those shows, might disagree with the way Disney's handling Star Wars, but can still respectfully give their opinion in a non-toxic manner. And I did that specifically because I'm well aware that toxicity is not just limited to the fandom menace. So in short summary, are sequel fans capable of being toxic? Short answer, yes, absolutely. That's without any doubt or debate. Long answer, let's get into it. So toxicity comes in a variety of forms, some being so minute that it's very easy to overlook that such behavior and actions could even be considered toxic, while others are just so blatant it's almost impossible for ignorance to be an excuse. And I'd like to take time to talk about each of those varying stages one at a time to fully explain why this behavior is just unacceptable across the board. And if you feel like anything I say personally applies to you, or if I'm calling you out specifically, I would hope that you don't take it as a personal attack, but rather see this as a learning moment and hopefully reflect on your behavior and hopefully take my words into consideration. The first and foremost, as I said, being very easy to overlook or misunderstand that it is actually toxic behavior, and that is unnecessary, mean-spirited comments. And even those can range from blatantly ignorance is not an excuse comments to something a little bit more minor, like this comment here, where I was having a spirited but respectful debate with another commenter, and someone came out of nowhere to comment, "Are you high?" which I find completely unacceptable. It is entirely unnecessary, and there's just no reason for you to comment something like that. If the conversation's being respectful, even if the guy is saying something that you disagree with or you find ludicrous, it doesn't even matter if he's commenting something completely insane and toxic and crazy. It doesn't give you the right to comment something like that in return. I know it might seem a little bit childish, but you gotta follow the age-old rule of if you can't say something nice, just don't say anything at all. If you can't comment something with a debateful manner in mind, it's just better to just leave things as they are. And for the individual out there who made this comment, if you're watching this video, if you're listening right now, I would really appreciate it if you chose to either reword your comment or just delete it. I'm not going to take it down right now. I want to give you a chance to do the right thing, but just know it's not personal, it's just unacceptable. And you should know better. Come on.
That's what I said back in the briefing room.
I know, but the way you said it was wrong.
Moving on from there, we transition into something a little bit more serious, and that would be sequel fans versus sequel fans. And that is a situation where even I have experienced for myself, where I've received reports from people who claim they are sequel fans, who have expressed some criticisms that they still have about the new movies, and they've come under attack from other sequel fans who just verbally cuss them out for daring to criticize these films that they like. And for any of you out there who've experienced this, who have dealt with people like this, I would really appreciate it if you share this video with them, because I would love to talk with them directly about this behavior. And for those of you out there who behave in such a manner, it's not my place to try and justify your behavior. I'm not going to do that because, as I've said before, I'm not going to be tribal about this. If you're behaving toxically, you have to be called out and you have to be asked to behave in a respectful manner, regardless of whose side you're on. Because when you behave like the fandom menace, you drag us all down to their level. So you have to be called out too. But allow me to extend an olive branch of understanding. And I would appreciate it if you commented down below if I'm dead on the money, hit the nail on the head, or maybe I'm just way off. But Maybe you're someone who has been a part of a lot of Facebook groups, public social media groups, fan pages, whatnot, and since the sequels arrived, you've had to deal with people constantly shitting all over these movies that you like, and whenever you try to express any enjoyment or love for those films, you get verbally castrated by these people for daring to express any joy for something that they don't like. Thing is, even if it is like that, even if that is your story, it doesn't matter. That kind of behavior is entirely unacceptable, and it helps the Fandom Menace win when you behave like that, because they drag you down to their level, and then they get to use you as a example where they can point to you and say, see, they're acting like us too. They act just as toxically as we do, so we're not the worst of the fandom either. And that allows their followers to blind themselves from the reality that their side is objectively more toxic than ours. And before I go any further, this should also be a show as to what the damage toxic fans of the Fandom Menace cause for sequel fans, for anyone else, for other people of the fandom when they go unchecked. Because I find it very hard to believe that a sequel fan is just going to be outright naturally toxic while they are loving something versus someone who hates something. Really think about that. When you're dealing with a fan that loves something, what are the reasons for him to behave toxically? Ask that same question about someone who's constantly watching YouTube videos that's reinforcing this hateful ideology in their head. Do I really need to go into detail and explain why one is more likely to produce toxic fans than the other? But again, regardless of that situation, the point still remains: toxic behavior is unacceptable, regardless of the side. My point is that this scenario creates an infinite loop where you have toxic fans emboldened by these rage bait channels that harass and slander other fans for their opinions, and that causes them to become defensive towards criticisms and attack people for just sharing their criticisms, and then those people get attacked, and then they internalize those complaints and think, well, my opinions are being attacked. They view those opinions as now more extreme, and then it just creates this infinite loop that just goes in one big circle. And it only ends if we behave rationally and reasonably to one another. Instead of outright jumping down someone's throat about something, you have to stop and you have to ask questions that engage a conversation. If you feel like someone's behaving toxically, but you feel like you have something that you could add to that conversation, ask them. Start by asking them, what do you mean by that? What could make you comment something like that? And if they continue to show themselves as this toxic personality where they're just raging out at you for daring to try and have a conversation about this, leave them alone. Let that toxic comment stand, and it just stands as a beacon as to what their behavior represents. And that's not the same as in my previous episode where I talked about my criticism for when it came to people trying to ignore the Fandom Menace's actions about the prequels. See, because one is about ignoring it wholesale across the board, and the other is allowing them to show themselves as a toxic person and then just stepping away. You show yourself as the more reasonable person and then you walk. Then they remain the bad guys and you come out as the good guy every single time. That's how the Fandom Menace loses. And honestly, I look at people like this kind of like Riva. These are people that I think are in pain, and they've dealt with a lot of toxicity. They've been subjected to the very worst kinds of people that have made their lives unpleasant, and it's unfun, and it's made them a little bit trigger happy and very defensive, and they just want to get back at them. They want revenge against the people that made them feel this way. But for those of us of a non-toxic fan base, we have a responsibility to try and be their Obi-Wans, to try and talk them down, talk some sense and reason into them, and explain to them, like, look, that's not appropriate behavior. You can't act like this. Well, you can't go to the Fandom Menace's level and behave like them and expect things to change. And if that's really not enough, and it's really just about getting justice against these people for making you just feel horrible all the time, the best possible thing that you can do to drive the toxic members of the Fandom Menace crazy is not to react toxically, not to fall to their level. There's very simple ways to do that. The best possible thing you can do is pretend whenever you're about to engage in someone in a discussion or a debate about their opinion, you have to pretend as though you're being watched at all times by members of this fandom who are on the fence, that haven't decided yet. They're watching both sides, they don't know which side they want to stand with. If you behave rationally, reasonably, and logically while they are losing their minds, cussing you out, freaking out, and attacking you, you leave them alone as they are, and you let them decide. You let those people on the fence decide. Because if they watch while one side of the fandom is remaining calm, collected, speaking clearly, and not acting as if it's a personal attack against the other person, while the other one's losing their shit and cussing them out for disagreeing with them, if they choose to side with that person, they're the bad guy. We don't need to care about convincing them. But if they have any kind of rational thought going on in their head, they will choose to stand with you, even if they don't agree with your opinion. And at that point, it creates a situation for the Fandom Menace where they have to decide how they're going to proceed. Because if they choose to keep things going the way they are, and if they are the only side with the fandom that is attacking, harassing, and cussing people out for having a different opinion, while there's this other portion of the fan base that is reacting logically and peacefully and rationally and politely, anyone on the outside with rational thinking is going to look at that and go, well, this side has all these angry people who hate everything, and this side allows for the discussion to, we can have the discussion about like things that we don't like, but we can still express our joy about things without it devolving into this back and forth shit show fest that these guys seem to be intent on always creating. So I'm going to stand with these guys. So the only methods they're going to be able to do is either keep things the way they go, which keeps things the way they are, or they have to start talking to their fan bases about everything I've just told you about, and asking them to behave in a more polite manner. And in such a scenario, the Fandom Menace dies. Because when we're all talking civilly, when we're all maybe disagreeing, but doing so in a mature manner, the Fandom Menace, it can't survive. It can't exist because it thrives on conflict. But when we're all able to rationally and reasonably and maturely deal with each other and converse with each other, there's no conflict for the Fandom Menace to play off of. The final version is probably the most extreme case, and this is one that I've never dealt with personally, that I actually have yet to see, but I have seen reports about that are shocking and appalling. And these are people who would say they love the sequel trilogy, but they don't like certain decisions that were made in regards to the last film or whatever. And this has gotten them to feel like they are justified in sending death threats to the director, or even going so far as to being so obsessed about these characters that they like that they stalk them. Now, I'm going to be very crystal clear about this particular form of toxic fandom. If you're the kind of person, regardless of which side you stand on, that thinks it's acceptable to send death threats to someone or stalk someone because you didn't like a piece of fiction, or that you're so obsessed with that fiction that you think it's acceptable to stalk someone, you have a very serious mental illness and you need to seek immediate psychiatric help. That's not me trying to lay on a burn. I'm speaking as someone genuinely concerned for your mental health, and I'm asking that you seek appropriate help for your issue, because that is a dangerous line to be walking, and I greatly fear for anyone who might end up on the receiving end of that kind of toxic behavior. Because if you truly don't understand the issue of behaving in such a way over fiction, you've lost grip on reality. I understand this is probably not a topic that's going to be fun for a lot of fans to really think about, because I'm sure I hope some of you will reflect on some of the things that you've said in the past, behaved in a way in the past, and maybe you'll feel like I'm calling you out, but I hope we can use this as a learning moment to try and better ourselves, because you know what? I'm not perfect either. I am constantly finding myself reacting poorly to certain situations because maybe sometimes I'm just having a bad day, but it doesn't make it right, it doesn't make it acceptable, and I'm always trying to do better every single time. And as long as you're trying to do that, you're on the right path. Try and do better, and I promise you it will lead to better things for you all. And if those of us who are trying to create a fan base that is non-toxic we have a responsibility to try and help these people through that by being a voice of reason for them. If you see someone behaving irrationally, you have a responsibility to try and talk sense into them and calm them down and behave appropriately. Because if you're not willing to do that, then don't complain when you're a part of a fandom that is filled with toxic people running amok, if you're not willing to put in the work to make it a better place. I hope you consider my words, and may the Force be with you, always.